Good evening, folks. I'm your host, Max Mogren, here at Wake Up News. We got a very special guest joining us today from Texas, the one and only Barrett Brown. You must have been living under a rock if you haven't heard of him yet. Barrett Brown, highly involved in all sorts of things for a very long time. Brilliant writer, winner of the 2016 National Magazine Award for his excellent commentary from federal penitentiary, where he was serving time after being made an example of in the wake of the Stratfor and HB Gary hacks. Do share this one. Do like it. Get the word out because Barrett Brown's got some big news today. Barrett, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Anybody who wants to know more about your time in prison and all that, you've done an excellent job reporting on that. Again, winning that national award, National Magazine Award for that. So we don't really want to, I don't know. We don't need to go too in depth on that, but maybe you could just give us a brief background on yourself for anybody that has been living under a rock for the last 15 years.
Well, I was a journalist and commentator for quite a long time, and gradually became more and more disenchanted with the framework of journalism in this country and the West in general. Was getting more and more interested in, having a direct impact on the issues that I was concerned about, rather than just, engaging in the system myself. And so Anonymous was at the same time gradually turning from a very interesting little just subculture of no real consequence into something unprecedented. And I was able to follow that. And at some point after writing about it, in the infancy of its activist period, was invited to come join one of the servers, Anonops, where a lot of these things were being conducted. The Tunisian assistance program, for instance, when they engaged when they assisted in the revolution in Tunisia. I joined up and kind of got involved in media operations and other things. Things kind of took on a life of their own. We were in this massive running battle with these intelligence contracting firms, these firms that provide intelligence, surveillance, and espionage services and software to governments and companies. We did a pretty good job of exposing a great deal of what goes on in that sector, which was previously opaque, very little understood. And that's what led the FBI to start investigating me directly and eventually to charge me with a number of counts, many of which they had to drop eventually. And but I was arrested and did 4 years in prison. Got out about a little over a year ago, and I'm now engaged mostly, first of all, in writing a book, and second of all, in putting together the Pursuance system, which is our attempts to kind of rekindle things, to create a framework whereby people from around the world who wants to help correct these deficits that we're talking about here can do so in a really comprehensive manner that allows for them to maintain their independence while still having access to huge numbers of other people.
Yeah, the notion on the Pursuance Project website there, the notion of people all over the world being able to collaborate and work together to expose this corruption, oppose the drug war, the surveillance, the cyber surveillance state, the police state. I'm sure you've had no shortage of experiences with the backwardsness and the corruption within the prison system, the legal system. So it's great to see that you're still fighting, still moving forward with the Pursuance Project. Your books, I've read Keep Rooting for Putin. That's an old one, obviously. And then Flock of Dodos. What are you working on now, Barrett, may I ask?
Yeah, the book I'm doing now, we signed a deal with Farrar, Straus and Giroux, which, unlike my previous books, is a major publisher. My other books were small outputs, never really made much money. Signed a deal with them as soon as I got out of prison. It's about it goes into all the sort of the mechanics of Anonymous and that kind of thing back in the day. It goes into what I saw in prison and how those dynamics can be applied to the larger picture. And then the end of it goes into the Pursuance system. Goes into both the specific problems that we have now as a transparency movement in terms of these divisions that now quite understandably exist between certain portions of that previous movement and other portions of it, as well as the broader problem of how do we take a situation in which we have, a huge number of people out there who could theoretically, if they were combined into some policy, could have some huge impact. How do we address all of the problems that come up when you try to do that? The things that come up with Anonymous when and maintain that agility that you see with Anonymous or anything else emergent of that nature, while minimizing the friction that occurs. And so we go into why the pursuance system can be viable, why it's necessary, obviously. So it's sort of a manifesto memoir.
Yeah. There's something you posted on your Twitter feed just today, actually, that I thought was pretty interesting. It's the "Do you know the way?" people trolling on VR chat, and I love this comment you had. You'd probably think I was joking if I claimed that this sort of thing can easily metastasize into a dynamic geopolitical force capable of destabilizing governments and undermining entrenched institutions for good or ill. But it's happened before. The do you know the way trolls on VR chat, just totally overrunning the system there, and obviously having a lot of fun with it. But the notion of getting all these people to work together globally for good or for evil, for kind of a fun purpose or for the purposes of taking down the cybersecurity complex is very real. And
in this case, obviously, despite what I said here, I am half joking. It'd be surprising if this particular thing did turn into something else. But again, I was obviously thinking when I first saw this of back in 2006 and 2007, where you have these Habbo hotel raids, and you have all these people who have come together, based on a message on a message board somewhere, and who are coordinating, in this case, just to troll and screw around, but who, when they do that, when they create a sort of tribe like that, and they have common lingo, they have common symbology that's understood to them and not to outsiders. No matter what you're doing in that process, even if it's just trolling an online game, you are developing these same sort of dynamics that existed with the Freemasons, which of course started as one thing and turned gradually into something else, or a couple different things, both in France and in England. And it happened with Anonymous. And, I think it happened with Anonymous twice, frankly. If you look at 4chan, you look at V, and a lot of this happened obviously while I was in prison, but you had a second movement, a more right-wing movement come out with the same dynamics, their own memes and all that. In many cases, the same memes that Anonymous drew out of the same proto-culture, then creating its own memes that both random and sometimes in service to their ideology, and then based on that shared heritage that's suddenly come out of existence, move against the existing structures and do so really unconsciously. But that's the kind of thing that can happen now. We've seen it happen just a few years ago, and it obviously almost certainly will happen again.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, good example, Anonymous going after the Church of Scientology, going after the cybersecurity complex. And I have to say, from my own personal experience, are you familiar with the Couch Gang on Facebook? So this is a troll community, similar thing. They got their own memes, they got their own inside lingo. And basically what the Couch Gang will do is they will post in a private group, they will post a live stream that's just getting going. And they'll all flood in there. So somebody who would normally have, just a few dozen viewers or whatever, all of a sudden they've got hundreds of viewers. But all of the viewers they're pretending that it's an online auction to buy a couch, right? So all the comments come through. It's like, excuse me, sir, is the couch still for sale? And, from my experience, they came after me, and it totally threw a loop for me because I didn't know what the hell the Couch Gang was. And it was a prime example of how a small group of people with a, back channel of communication can totally gum up the works for a live streamer or a business, you name it.
And it wouldn't be satisfying to them if you did know. That's the thing. A huge part of it is not just a shared cultural heritage, but a secret shared cultural heritage. And that's a driving. That's one of those things that the problem with it is it's little understood. It's not something that's in the forefront of consciousness. When we think about geopolitics and how structures work, how institutions work, we don't think about it. But it's something that's proven to be a powerful motivating force throughout history. that kind of having a secret and symbolism. You combine those two things; those are very deep-seated needs that come out of apparently being a conscious, sentient creature. And those things, again, so I was just pointing that out because there's nothing we can do about this really, as such. I mean, the fact, it's just one of those new dynamics that, aside from what it means in and of itself, also kind of indicates we're in very different times now. And we've had not just a qualitative difference because of the information age in what can emerge, but or not just a quantitative difference, but I mean, the quantitation has gotten so vast as to make it a qualitative difference. These are different times in which different things can happen, and in which we can't expect to look at 30 years ago or try to draw lessons from the 20th century to determine what's possible and what might happen in the 21st century. It's not possible. Too many things have changed on a fundamental basis. And to the extent we harness them, to the extent we assess them and harness them, the people who support the open society support, decency and transparency and facts, to the extent that we harness those same things, with our eyes open, we do have a chance to drive very fundamental sort of self-perpetuating changes.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then, on the topic there, it seems throughout human history, like you were saying, the Anons, the Couch Gang, whoever, the secret societies that arguably built our civilization up to what it is, everybody loves to feel like they belong in a community. Everybody likes to feel important, and everybody loves an inside joke, right?
Exactly, and that's another. We have another great sort of parallel between the last 10 years and the periods of the more interesting periods of Western history, the 16th and 17th centuries, with the Freemasons and all that. The Freemasons, contrary to some of the understanding that some people have in the modern age, was never a monolithic group. It was always divided into, both structurally in terms of different heads, different sectors, but also ideologically. Obviously, the Freemasons in France in the 18th century were much more anti-clerical and much more anti-monarchical than, say, the Freemasons in England, who were in some cases, tended to be more agnostic, tended to be a driving force behind things like the Royal Society, which advanced science and kind of brought in this age of ours. But so things can fracture. And so it's not enough to know that or to believe that that there's a certain mentality that drives something like the Freemasons or Anonymous or 4chan. You always have to remember that you're dealing with a large group that can develop fractures. You're dealing with a conspiratorial organism that can very easily fracture into different directions, and they tend to do that. And that's the same thing with U.S. institutions, government institutions. Another important lesson for anyone who wants to confront institutions is to remember that they are not monoliths. It's easy and sometimes necessary to say, oh, the CIA wants this, or the New York Times wants this, but it's never true. That's always just a sort of a map, a framework. In reality, we have all these individuals who are going to some degree share some both practical motivations and sometimes ideology, but more often it's an organism at war with itself. And those fractures that exist within any kind of institution or grouping or culture, those are important. Those are the fractures that you have to be aware of, so that you know how you're going to eventually separate a certain portion of that institution from another one in order to win some sort of victory. So these are all kind of interrelated issues that all kind of interest me. How people work when they get in groups, how these different groups can sort of how they can depart from their original intent, how they often do. I mean, I should cut off there, but it's interesting times we live in, and the basis of our understanding has to run from not just formal history of our institutions, the CIA, the British Empire. It also has to run into these more esoteric groupings, ranging from the original Freemasons up until the Couch Gang.
Yeah. Well, one thing it seems to me, in my experiences, whether talking,
I'm gonna splash hot water on my face real quick. I'm tired of looking at myself in the thing. I'm kind of greasy. I just woke up. I'm gonna splash hot water on my face, get another cup of coffee. That'll give you a chance to.
Sounds good. I'll do a little segue here while you're gone. So Barrett, running off to freshen up a bit. If you're not familiar with his work, again, spend some time in the Clink. The Free Barrett Brown, no shortage of support. If you want to donate to his cause, check it out there. easy to donate to Barrett's work. He's written some great books. This one you can download for free. Keep Rooting for Putin. It's an older book, but still really hilarious and pertinent today. Anybody got any questions? Lay them on me there in the comments while we're waiting for Barrett to get back. And his latest work, the Pursuance Project, he's writing a column over there at Motherboard on Vice. This one from August 31st kind of lays out the reasoning behind the Pursuance Project and a basic framework. I'll paste that into the comments now. There we go. And again, if you're interested in the Pursuance Project, do check it out over at pursuanceproject.org. A great little rundown on it here. Also, extended question and answer there that published a few months ago. But Barrett, welcome back. Thank you so much. Moving along, one thing, being independent media, I'm by no means as accomplished a journalist as you, but one thing I found in the independent media is it is damn hard to make a living at it. And it seems like that, whether it's the Pursuance Project or whatever, a lot of these guys that are working, you say, internal battle at places like the New York Times, the NSA, the CIA, fracturing even within the secret societies themselves. How do we go about funding people? We talk about getting everybody to collaborate, but if people can't get their basic needs met financially, how do we keep a cohesive group working together?
Well, this is a problem that's been addressed before. It's been addressed, for instance, in the late 19th century, both in the U.S. and other countries where you had early labor movements. You had early political parties, oftentimes made up of working class people. They solved it in a couple of different ways. One of them was the leadership tended to be people of means. Obviously people like Vladimir Lenin, all of them came from a degree of support where they weren't day-to-day starving. That's one answer, partial answer. The other is that you just make sacrifices. You also have working class people who were laboring, under circumstances much worse than any of us, particularly me since I don't work, than we confront, and they nonetheless did their thing. The answer that we, in our situation with Pursuance system, for instance, we sort of people who are going to be working with, just like people who work with Anonymous or any of these other groups. These are people who, for whatever reason, have a portion of time, not necessarily resources, but time that they can expend on these things. And these things, in our case, tend to be high marginal utility, as in we don't spend money or resources to do these things. These things are all based on our strengths, which is information. It's based on applying power creatively and in a clever manner, rather than raising huge amounts of money to spend on lobbying or advertisements. So it's a question that I haven't really tangled with because it hasn't really come up from my standpoint. As in, we're always looking for those people who do have some time available to do these things. And frankly, I think that really covers most people. I mean, even if you're working 2 jobs a week, you're not much worse off than Emma Goldman was when she started her campaigns back in the day. In fact, you're probably better off at this age, thanks to people like that. So I mean, my thing would be, my major response on all that would be to, just to evaluate what your resources actually are and what your time actually is.
Right on. I guess I was trying to segue into the whole cryptocurrency thing, that there's been so much chatter on cryptos lately. I still remain skeptical. To me, it seems like the financial powers that be are attempting to co-opt or crack down on cryptocurrencies every chance they can get. What's your overall take on cryptocurrencies, Barrett?
As someone with very little grounding in economics and finance, all I can really say is that anything like this that has the potential to be a major driving force, of course you're going to have powerful institutions trying to co-opt them or alternatively ban them, as the case might be. So I can't speak to specifics of, should everyone start doing this particular thing? I really don't know. I have no, I remember back in the day with Anonymous, cryptocurrencies were being used for donations by LulzSec, for instance. They were taking in those, and occasionally using them for work-related purposes, but I think buying servers, that kind of thing. So it's something that where it's clearly viable to some extent. That extent, I don't know, but I mean, I tend to emphasize projects that don't require funding. And the reason I do that is even aside from kind of staying light, staying loose and not requiring any overhead, it also, every project serves as a sort of showcase at that point. When you do something with very few resources, you gather a few people with clever ideas, and you manage to do something big, it shows that can be done. And it helps to encourage people not to think, oh, well, what can I do? I don't have, millions of dollars to spend on Africa redevelopment or whatever. It does encourage them to think along the lines of, oh, wow, these people did this with no resources. So what can we do? And that's an important mentality to have in the air. That's something that's a huge driver of innovation and of activism. So having not emphasized cryptocurrency, I can say that we know that a lot of people that create pursuances within the pursuance system are going to be doing things where they are raising money or spending money. And although we don't have anything built into the system as such that addresses cryptocurrency, it's very easy for someone who's creating a pursuance to have an outside apparatus to handle whatever that might be. It's something that's clearly going to go forward. You're going to see more of it. You're going to see variations on it. That's really all I can say about it.
Yeah. To me, it seems like the cryptos are kind of, there's a famous quote from, I think, Alfred North Whitehead, that all the great technological innovations all but destroy the civilizations they occur in. Whether it was the nuclear arms proliferation or fossil fuels, the computer itself, the internet itself, the flood of information we see and how it affects people and institutions in so many ways. And perhaps cryptocurrencies are the latest, they're the .com, it could be like the .com bubble, but for every bubble that burst in the .com bubble, there was a Facebook, social media arose out of it, the technological innovations of advanced computing and so forth arose out of that. So hopefully the cryptocurrencies kind of at least give us some options in the financial world as opposed to being limited by centralized currencies. But I really like the notion of doing things, people getting together, banding together, collaborating globally without having money, and being creative enough to not need a lot of money to make a huge impact on institutions.
Yeah, I know. Having said that, of course, I know I emphasize that. Obviously, I have no problem whatsoever with any activism that requires money. There's all kinds of things that I'm not particularly interested in, that I don't have a background in, where raising the money is an entirely legitimate, necessary portion of it. And so I don't want to try to indicate otherwise, that you shouldn't be doing that. People should. In fact, there's a number of things that need to be approached all at once in different ways. And so, cryptocurrency very well may be the answer, that they're looking for to avoid whatever the pitfalls are of standard currency.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I've heard chatter, people talk about the cryptocurrencies like it's basically like a decentralized global stock market. And a lot of these new, they call it an ICO, an initial coin offering versus an IPO, initial public offering for a typical corporation. And there are ICOs out there doing all sorts of things now. What do you think of the idea of a decentralized, let's say there's the Associated Press, right? What if there was the Free Press and it was a decentralized institution with no corporate headquarters where journalists, writers, live streamers, graphic designers, people all over the world could collaborate and basically, create an entirely new media that's, overseen by editors, with the same level of credibility of the mainstream media, but with the funding mechanism completely outside of the existing financial system.
Well, you have the rudiments of that already, in the sense you have journalists who work off of Patreon, essentially. Those are sort of just single elements of what you're describing. And I think there's also been efforts to take, you've had lots of independent organizations that have come and gone, and mostly gone over the last 10 years, where they have something of that nature in mind originally. And, we're going to do this, and this. and just for different reasons, just because the leadership isn't there, or because that they've just so any number of things can go wrong, or not just wrong, but not entirely right when trying to put something like that together, and they just kind of fall into non-existence. Having said that, those, just like you said, with the bubbles burst, but things come out of them. That's something that we can expect to see in some form in the next 20 years, and it's certainly something we can start thinking about putting together. The pursuance system could be used, for instance. I mean, look, one of the main sort of broad things we're pushing with the pursuance system, aside from just sort of the digital activism of the sort that's come around in the last 10 years, is crowdsourced research and crowdsourced journalism, whereby we're going to make it easier for journalists who are interested in crowdsourcing to do that without an outlay of time and energy. We're going to make it so that a journalist can pick two people or one person that he considers reliable, and have him build a network under that person that he'll handle, whereby volunteers can either submit. The journalist could, for instance, say, I'm researching this particular topic, and the message goes down to all these people that look for stuff on this topic. And so instead of having a single journalist who's making a few calls to a few experts he can think of or otherwise get in touch with, and depend upon, in part, their take on things, and then take it to an editor who is not a specialist in this subject, and it all goes to a fact checker who's not a specialist in this subject, which is a model we've had for several hundred years, largely unchanged. Instead, you have an entirely different way of assessing a subject, allowing that to filter up such that even if you have lots of people who join on this network who don't know what they're talking about, their submissions are still going up to the people who originally were chosen because they are reliable. And so the journalist isn't bothered with it. It's not like he's going on Twitter and putting out a message and saying, hey, everybody, tell me about this subject. And then he's having to sort of wade through all this stuff that could be nonsense. It's a filtering organism such that. So what we devise in that is, I think, it's something it's kind of built upon the examples that we've seen and involved ourselves in with Project PM, my other group, where we did crowdsourced investigations into intelligence contracting. It's based on principles that we know work, and we think it addresses the problems that can come with that kind of thing. And so it's there's no such thing as a perfect system, but this, I think, is something that can get even sort of mainstream journalists can try this. They might be inclined to try this, especially after they see others do it. And having tried it and having found that it makes their job easier and actually results in more reliable reporting. I think it's one of those things that can drive things towards that larger goal of having a more organic, a more refined system of information. And that's something where we're just not going to see through the industry itself. As in, if you look at the motivations and situation that the average freelancer is in and the average editor, it's very career oriented. This is not a system that was designed by some omnipotent being 100 years ago to be the best manner of serving as a nervous system for a complex 21st century republic. This is something that's drawn up haphazardly because of market forces and because of individual ambitions, etc. So you're always going to have those dynamics, but this does give us a chance to design things and not just design things that make sense, but to do so in a way that people are actually going to use them and try them out, and that could lead to something else. And so there's a number of ways, and we can start moving forward with getting to that more optimal journalistic structures. It's just it requires a number of different steps, and it requires us to kind of we have to make things easy for the people that we're trying to get to change their habits. That's always the role here. That should be the main argument, is that, look, we can make this easier for you. Not just better journalism, which may not, as a careerist, may not make a difference to you whatsoever, but that will make your job easier, make your life easier.
Yeah. Lord knows it's difficult in the world today with so much misinformation, disinformation flying around. To try to research a topic and write a 100% factual, credible article on any meaningful, important topic is a Herculean task. I'm sure you've experienced that many times in your past, dealing with the surveillance state and so forth. What do you think about the current situation with the, we got the Democratic resistance against Trump, but at the same time, they all just recently voted to reinstate the NSA surveillance powers that Trump enjoys as the commander in chief. How are we doing in the fight against the surveillance state right now?
Yeah, I mean, not very well, and I mean, understandably not. The thing about our existing politics is that we can't abandon them, but at the same time, we can't put all our faith in it. So there's the pursuance system, for instance. When we have people come onto this, we're not going to be saying this is your replacement for the existing civics. We want you to come on here and forget all about existing structures and then try to do this new thing. It's more along the lines of think of the governments or the existing institutions as a building that needs repairs or is falling apart. Pursuance system is scaffolding. And like scaffolding, you can use it for several different things with several different end goals. If you are a reformer rather than revolutionary, that's fine. There are certainly parts of this building that needs to be refurbished, and you can use the scaffolding to do that. If your ultimate goal, if you're sort of a one-issue voter and you're against the drug war, for instance, well, that you can come on the scaffolding and help us, remove these pieces of this building. If you're a revolutionary's end goal, you're opposed to the entire system. Well, you can take out help. There's people in here who agree with you to a point and want to help you take out these pieces. Work with them on do that. The other thing about scaffolding is you can put nets on it, and when a building pieces start to fall off, nets prevent it from hitting people. We should think of it like that. Like there is this system here. It exists. It's not going away tomorrow. It doesn't matter if we bring on 80,000 people in the pursuance system and develop, a very sophisticated means of cells and propaganda and blah blah blah. It's going to be there. So at the same time, it's not all there is. And so anyway, relying on the Democratic Party is a great way to miss out on a lot of opportunities right now. The opportunities being that more and more people understand the extent to which our system is not viable. And so, when something like this happens, when you have these same Democrats who are using this rhetoric on Trump, quite correctly, in my opinion, then they turn around and vote to give more powers to this government that we've just seen it fall into this sort of pseudo-fascist administration just a year ago. I mean, we're not having to imagine these things. We're not having to say, oh, what if in 20 years from now, some horrible president who, 50% of the population who are deranged, what if they gain power? We're not having to hypothesize that. That's actually happened. And yet here they are still, acting as if this was not the case, acting as if we were back in the 90s. And we have a relatively technocratic, relatively, non-deranged administration of power. So that's a great argument for us, for the scaffolding, to say, let's prepare. Let's keep reforming. Let's keep, engaging with the system. But let's also start building something that can do a number of things at once. One of those things being to create this polity, this counter civics that will exist in case something terrible happens, which it very well might. And so that's the main. That's one of the important parts of this, is that we're not trying to divide. We're not trying to make this argument that everyone has to agree to, that everything's broken. We're trying to provide a framework whereby those people can work with the people who are still reformers, still incrementalists, blah, blah, but they can all work together. They can all sort of be on the same page to an extent, and they can all be available to each other to work on ad hoc issues that they can definitely win on. And that's where we are. I mean, and this is a great example of the larger dynamic we're confronting, where we have a party that is somewhat better than the other party, but it's still itself a very dangerous party, and we have to engage with it practically.
Speaking of parties, it seems like some of the board or some of your coworkers there at the Pursuance Project are really involved in the Internet Party and the Pirate Party. What's your take on both of those phenomenons? I know in, what's his name? I'm having a brain fart here. I think he's one of your board members, and he won in Iceland recently, I believe.
Oh, we have Birgitta Johnsdotter, who was she was formerly with WikiLeaks. She was I think she's depicted. I haven't seen the movie The Fifth Estate, but she's depicted in there. She was early involved in that early on, before she kind of disagreed with the Assange on some things and kind of left. But she's been a major Pirate Party figure in Iceland for a number of years, and they had a significant electoral victory right before I got out of prison, actually. And yeah, she's on the board. She's involved. She put together the Icelandic Modern Media Initiative, which later became the International Modern Media Initiative, which I'm on the board of, and has otherwise kind of been involved heavily in a lot of the innovative ways of addressing these things, again, through the system, through elected politics. I mean, she is an anarchist and a Pirate Party member, but she's also a parliamentarian. And so we're obviously very happy to have her involved. She's had some interesting ideas as well, even aside from her position being helpful. She is a very innovative thinker, as she would kind of have to be. And we have other people like that. We have Pirate Party members, as well as we have a member of the board of directors of the Pirate Party International, Raven Johansson, who's a very, very energetic person who's done a great deal since signing on with us. And we're engaged with some of the individual pirate parties in the Netherlands, for instance. There's a couple of local ones in the U.S. And we expect to be sort of solidifying relationships with more of those as time goes on. That's obviously a natural constituency for us. Our main interest, even aside from just formally connecting with these parties, is really to recruit their members, because obviously that's kind of, those are people that we expect to bring on and have them be very productive within this kind of framework. So things like that, obviously, that's something we naturally reach out to. We reach out to institutions of all sorts, because aside from the aspect of this whereby we're trying to solve the problem of how large numbers of people with no relationship can quickly coalesce within a system where there's a meaningful and reasonable sort of way for them to develop into structures. We're also trying to take existing institutions, as I've emphasized, and try to help get them incorporated here, get them to use this to take advantage of people who might want to help them out, to get free services, to connect with other institutions in ways that might not be as visible or kind of actionable on the outside, and to otherwise integrate all these different things, both formal and informal, into a single unitary framework, whereby they're not giving up any independence or making any commitments, but they are suddenly seeing all these other options. And so to that end, yeah, we've dealt with those parties. The Internet Party out of New Zealand, we had one of the heads of that party in our group for a while. Then we broke off ties with her a month ago after a disagreement about very, very fundamental issues. Aside from that, I don't think I'm not sure who else we're involved in with that political party.
Yeah, speaking of the fundamentals of the Pursuance Project, correct me if I'm wrong, but the basic three tenets that the Pursuance Project wants all of its members to hold is anti-police state, anti-surveillance state, and anti-drug war. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's one of those things where we wanted to ensure that everyone understood from the get-go that this is not a content-neutral system. It's not Facebook. It's not whatever. It's not a means where we're sitting here and thinking, oh, if only everyone were more empowered, things would be better. Because I don't believe that. I believe that we've already had that. We have a system in which almost every adult can vote. I can't. I'm a felon. I no longer have the franchise. But we have a system, allegedly a universal democracy. And we have Trump as president. And before that, we had a lot of other crappy presidents as well. And we've had issues, monumental issues involving, military forces deployed across the globe that haven't even really been addressed. They don't really get discussed seriously in the Commons. And so I'm not sweet on democracy right now. Having said that, I am sweet on the idea of that portion of global citizens who ascribe to the open society, ascribe to these basic tenets of being in a single polity and having the rights within that polity to create their own institutions as they want to, create their own entities, and to experiment and sort of deal with each other as they choose. And so the question of what tenets should we put out there was one of those things where there's a lot of different right answers to that question. We chose those three things because overall, that cuts off a lot of the people that we just definitely don't want involved. There's no one out there who supports the drug war that we want involved in open society activism, fighting for a better civilization. That's just not the case. Anyone who's opposed to gay marriage, that was the fourth one. Generally, we just don't want them involved in anything. Anyone who says, "Oh, I love the police state," obviously, I mean, these are pretty basic, agreements that all reasonable people who intellectually curious people all kind of agree on these things. Now, we don't define those things either. We don't define what the surveillance state means. So you could actually theoretically come into the pursuance system and agree that the CIA, something like that should exist, and that's not a problem. That's for you to deal with whoever you work with. But obviously, we have these really less as a means of actively barring people, rather as a means of conveying what this is about, what our culture is intended to be. And so, and we have the opportunity, creators of the pursuance system, to define that culture to an extent, since we get to pick who comes in at first. But over time, after those people come in, each of them has the right to bring on others, as they choose, without any interference from us. So ultimately, the culture we don't get to decide as it evolves, but we do have a head start by developing the early population. That's a population that we can expect not to turn into some kind of alt-right monstrosity in 5 years. That's just unlikely to happen because of what we started with. But over time, you're going to see groups in there that I personally won't agree with, or are going to dislike. But we don't perceive this as leading to something that's going horribly wrong, quite frankly. There's just so many things built into the system that kind of do push it along certain lines, broad lines, of being in favor of the open society, being essentially being an honest, intellectually honest global citizen.
Gotcha. Well, if people want to get involved with the Pursuance Project, where should we send them? Obviously, the Pursuance Project website. At this stage of the game, is there anything people can do other than just putting their email in to join a mailing list, or are there ways to get more involved now?
Yeah, there are. The most important thing right now, obviously, the initial population, the kind of people that we have on early on, is going to make a huge impact on how this develops. And so, to the extent that someone's interested in this, they should be thinking about what people they know that they also would like to see involved in this, and what groups and organizations they know. The way an institution or organization joins is basically similar to how an individual joins. Just someone representative from that organization signs up, and then having signed up, when they come in, they can create a pursuance for that organization. And it can be a real minor thing where they're just sort of there and occasionally maybe take advantage of design help or coding or something like that, or some of the volunteer services that participants will provide, or they might get more heavily involved and build up a big structure intended to serve as a outgrowth of their existing activities. It's up to them, obviously, and that's something they can kind of decide over time. But so the bottom line is, we want to make sure that the groups out there that can benefit from this and that can contribute to building this larger polity are aware of the pursuance system and are encouraged to join up. So the main thing any individual can do right now is to think of several organizations in their area, that we're not going to be able to think of, that they're local groups perhaps, or national organizations that are small and but they could benefit from this, and explain to them how pursuance, how they can use it, and why they should consider signing up. That's the most important thing right now. That's what we'd like to see. Is we've got over 1,500 people who have signed up, as of right now. A number of organizations within that, and it's not terribly necessary that when we launch that we have a couple thousand people. What's more important is that we have a really solid population of people. It'll grow pretty quickly once it's launched. It's just kind of designed to work that way. But we always do want more and better people involved.
So when is is there a scheduled launch date yet?
No, we've been playing pretty loose with that. We have testing going on right now. We have some groups, both individuals and some groups that we're working with that are to some extent doing testing with the basic tools we have. We have, aside from the aspect of it described in the website, where you have this sort of universe and these structures and these individuals creating pursuances, you also have a task management software that we've created work with it, and those are being tested right now. I'm assuming that this will be launched in the next few months or so.
Right on. Good to know. There's the link up on the page there for anyone that wants more info on the Pursuance Project. Do check it out. It's nice to know that there are brilliant people out there like Barrett Brown fighting the good fight, opposed to the drug war, the surveillance state, the police state, corruption in its many forms. Barrett, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss here this evening?
That's the main thing. The Pursuance Project is something that a lot of us, I've been planning this for about a decade now in different forms, and obviously had the opportunity to work with things like Anonymous, where I got to see how some of these dynamics play out and how they can go right and how they can go wrong, and what specifically needs to be addressed, not just in broad terms, but just the little day-to-day interactions that you can over time get a sense of. These lead to these consequences and these lead to other consequences. So this is coming from not just my expertise, but that of others that we have involved that have, who all kind of agree that this is something that's time has come, and that this is, the major sort of precept here, the major idea behind this is that the most important fact of the 21st century is that any individual can now collaborate with any other individual across the planet for the first time in history, and that's something that's come into reality very quickly in historical terms, and we have yet to see what that really means. We've seen a little bit. We've seen some sort of manifestations of what it could mean. We've seen some very unprecedented things happen with Anonymous and WikiLeaks over the years. We see how important it is that the collaborational aspects that define our societies to begin with, that sort of gave rise to nation states, that this environment has fundamentally changed. And I would ask people to, when determining what's possible and what's viable and what's realistic for the next 10 or 20 years, to keep in mind that we don't have a whole lot to go on, and that to the extent you're drawing parallels and historical insights in the 20th century or previous to that, you're talking about entirely different environments. And so I do believe, and the people involved in this project do believe, that within a few years we will have in the Pursuance system a very formidable, very agile global force in play that's capable of confronting criminalized institutions around the globe in ways that I think will be shocking to a lot of people when they see it in play. Go to pursuanceproject.org and read about it. Read our manifesto that I put up at Vice a few months ago. Yeah. And please tell others tell others to sign up and get involved, because we really don't have any viable choice aside from this.
Right on. Thank you so much, Barrett. Just to reference this article briefly, there is that article at Motherboard, What is to be Done, published by Barrett at the end of August. A great read there. Strongly recommend everybody check that one out. Ladies and gentlemen, Barrett Brown, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. You have a lovely evening, sir, and wish you the best of luck with these projects. And I, for one, am grateful that gentlemen like you are out there fighting the good fight, and you're on the good team as opposed to the guys, spying on us, surveilling us, police stating us, and stealing our drugs for a paycheck. So thank you so much, Barrett. You have a lovely night, and we'll talk to you soon, man.
All right, you as well.
All right, bye.